Hi, welcome back to another Walter Scott Prize for Historical Fiction 2026 video. In this series, I'm trying to get through the long list. I doubt I'll get through the long list before the shortlist is announced, but it'd be great if I could get through the long list before the winner is announced, just so I've read them all. And can offer some thoughts on who I think should win. So this is the second in this series. I've already read Eden Shore by Ocean Fagan, which I really liked. It was just a little niggly bit. And it was mainly me. It wasn't nothing to do with the author. It was just, with the ending, I had certain thoughts about what I thought was happening. But there's no real clarification as a reader, for me anyway. But I still really enjoyed it. But yeah, the last third, very exciting, very dramatic, very dreamy. But yeah, I was just lacking that clarification, which would indicate to me what I was thinking was happening, which sounds really confusing, but I just can't think of a better way to put it. Anyway, this second video in this series, I went for one of the shorter ones, see if I could get it out of the way a bit quicker, and that is Benbecula by Graeme, Macrae, Burnet. It's quite short, really oddly as well. It's got an afterword, but the afterword is like 25 pages long. Having read the afterword, I'm not sure a lot of it was needed, but I mean, it does offer some thoughts regarding how the author came to the story, and obviously the influences and evidence that he used, because Benbecula is based on real events on the island of Benbecula, which is in the Scottish Hebrides, in the mid-19th century, around 1857, I believe. I'm going to look for the date and it's not going to be anywhere, is it? 1857. Oh, I was right. So Benbecula, this small island life, a number of families who live there, working the land. Everyone knows everyone. And we have this family, and they are kind of positioned as a bit of an odd family, to be honest. I don't want to give away too much on my thinking, but so it centres around the MacPhee family and the events which took place one day in July 1857. But the story is told in the first person narrative from Malcolm MacPhee, who is the brother of Angus, and Angus is the one that commits some really atrocious acts. So Benbecula starts with a bit of a backstory to the MacPhee family. We have the mother, father, the 4 siblings. Have I just made that up? No, 4 siblings. And the aunt who lives very close by, next door, practically in a small building. They work the land. They don't make much. Some might class them as poor, but they're not really that worse off than some people. Like the aunt is on the poor register, whereas the MacPhees themselves, they just about manage to get by, but they're not rich by any stretch of the imagination. And we have an insight into their life, and it's really quite fascinating and interesting for such a short book, how gripped I was by the story. And that could be down to an idea the author gives us partway through the book, which could suggest why I was so enthralled and gripped by the story. So just over halfway through, the author writes, in the words of Malcolm MacPhee, "I do not suppose that many among you would have the least interest in the incidents I have thus far related, were it not for the fact that they serve as a prelude to violence. When a tale promises bloodshed, no one leaves their seat, and you may rest easy that I do not mean to disappoint you." So that could be part of the reason why I was quite gripped by, because you know from the outset that Benbecula is based on these quite tragic real events that happened, where Angus MacPhee is not the youngest sibling. I think he's the second youngest sibling. On one day in July, murders his aunt, his mother, and his father. That's no secret from the beginning, but the tale that leads up to that and the backstory is what I find really gripping. I really wasn't expecting to enjoy this. I thought I was going to be bored. I thought it was going to be quite literary, and it's not. It's actually just really simple storytelling, a bit like The Land in Winter. That's how I felt like the storytelling, very simplistic, but not in a negative way. just very easy to follow, very easy to get lost in. It's not trying to be something it's not. It's just a really interesting story, and a really interesting story for the author to pick up on. Apparently they came across it whilst reading a book on Scottish histories of the Macrae. There's not a lot. I got a lot of information from newspapers and local galleries, national archives, but there's still not loads of information. Obviously, a lot of what the main bones of the story are real, but the author has obviously fictionalized other stuff. But it's just really, it's really fascinating. And the ending, you have an insight, because you're led to believe that Angus went away to do some work nearby for someone else. And when he came back from this work, he was a changed man. Like before this, he never showed signs of violence or any sorts of being weird, anything like that. You're led to believe that it all started when he came back from this employment. But as the story goes on, you're led to kind of start thinking, well, is that the case? Or was he showing signs of being slightly deranged before this in his attitude towards the locals, especially young girls in the locality? And then you start thinking, well, is this not just Angus? Is this, the whole family, how they are as a unit, which maybe has caused this, or they're all maybe suffering slightly from some mental incapacity? And it's quite interesting in the afterword where the author does mention, in that sort of area, a lot of people were marrying young. They were getting married very young, having families so they could have children, so they could then start having children to work the land from an early age. But it mentioned all four siblings quite comfortably in their 20s. I believe Marion, the oldest sister, was 30. All unmarried, never had really much interaction with the other sex, never had really much interaction in terms of looking to get married. There are a couple of bits that the author adds in, which adds to the story. But yeah, I found it really fascinating, and I really wasn't expecting it. As I said, the language used is quite simple, but in a great way. It's not to say like basic, but simplistic storytelling is just, I don't know, manages to grip you. But there is some beautiful language. One of my favourites, where he's kind of explaining Malcolm, who is the narrator, the brother of Angus, sometimes has these dark thoughts himself. And he writes, "One cannot choose what thoughts one has, but one can choose whether to act upon them. This is what distinguishes us from beasts, but certainly there can be no act without there first having been a thought. The thought is the seed of the act, but not all seeds germinate." And so, yeah, when I say it's simplistic, it's not a negative thing. It's actually really clever. And I just really enjoy the story. It helps that it's short. It helps that the chapters are quite short as well. That's another thing I forgot to mention about Eden Shaw. There's like 5 chapters in the whole book. The chapters are broken up, but they are long. Whereas this is nice and short. It keeps the story moving along nicely. And you know what? Some of it, and it's probably just because of the setting, the imagery reminded me slightly of Clear by Carrie Davis from last year. Completely different stories. But, the background, the setting, this sort of island life in the mid-19th century, very simple times, the way people interact with each other, the way they know each other, and the way they respond to each other. But yeah, the story is obviously completely different. It's a lot more dark and sinister. But yeah, I really enjoyed it, and I do think it is a 5 stars from me. The ending, I would maybe have liked just a tad more clarity, because you're led down a path believing that something has happened to one of the characters, but you're not given confirmation of that. But you are kind of led down this path of starting to maybe believe Angus wasn't the only person who had issues, which is quite interesting. It's very thought-provoking, dark, mysterious, almost, I suppose you could call it a bit of a psychological thriller-ish. Maybe if the ending was kind of just expanded on slightly. But yeah, it's a fascinating little read, which I really enjoyed. So that's my thoughts on Benbecula by Graeme, Macrae, Burnet. I really enjoyed it. I think it's 5 stars from me. It had that sort of essence when I was reading that made me want to carry on and read more, which I know when that happens, it's a good thing. It's dark. It's almost like an exploration of yourself. There was, I suppose, some connotations with the Mare by Angrahad Hampshire, in terms of you have a character who's reliving a story about someone they loved, a family member they loved, who's done something really terrible, and that kind of, the way that tears them up inside, because you've got Malcolm's, he will admit internally he knows his brother was a bad egg, but when other people try to maybe say the same, he offers some signs of protectiveness. You know, you can't say that, I can say that. It's, yeah, that struggle internally about, you know, how someone you love or one of your family members can do something so horrific, and then how that then eats him up inside. You know, the internal struggle of, could they have done more? Could Malcolm have done more? Could they have prevented it? But also, is it affecting them in the same way? Are they going down that same path? And yeah, it's a fascinating little read. I say it probably helps because it is a shorter novel. So yeah, I really enjoyed that. Next up, I'm not sure what I'm going to read next. Probably I'll try and tackle one of the bigger ones and get one of those out of the way. But that's my thoughts. If you've read it, let me know what you think about Benbecula. Yeah. I'm just trying to think in my mind what I might do next, but I don't know. Anyway, so that's my thoughts on Benbecula. Thanks for watching. As I say, if you've read the book, let me know down below what you thought of it. Yeah, it's definitely one more my style. I say, nice, simplistic narrative, easy to get into, very gripping, wanting to know what happens next, even though you know what happens. Yeah, really good. That's it for now. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.